Hey guys, in this tutorial I'm gonna show you how to create some awesome clothes simulations in Marvelous Designer. We'll start by preparing a character in Blender, then jump into Marvelous Designer to create and simulate the clothing. And don't worry if you're new to this, I'll walk you through everything step by step. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear workflow for adding beautiful clothes to your character. Before we dive into the tutorial, I want to thank you all for helping me reach 7,000 followers on Instagram. It means a lot to me. To prepare a character in Blender, you just have to make sure it's in either T-pose or A-pose. For this tutorial, I'm using a character from HumanGen, but you can use any character source like Dash, Character Creator or MetaHuman. Once our character is ready, I'll select it and export it as an OBJ file, and that's it for the Blender part. Now it's time to switch over to Marvelous Designer and start working on the clothing. The first thing we're gonna do is click on Import and select the 3D file we just exported from Blender. Now if you haven't set your shortcuts to the Maya preset, you can do that by going to Settings and Preferences. For beginners, I'll quickly go over some shortcuts to help you get started. Use Alt and left mouse button to rotate around the model, Alt and middle mouse to pan the view, and mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out. Once you get comfortable with these shortcuts, navigating in Marvelous Designer will feel much easier. On the left side, we have the 3D window. Here we can simulate and adjust the clothing directly on our character. On the right side, we have the 2D pattern window, and we can create and edit patterns here. For this tutorial, I'll recreate the Japanese uniform that I made for Akari. First, I'll go to the 2D pattern window and select the rectangle tool. Then I'll draw a rectangle based on my estimation to create the upper part of the skirt. I'm not using any exact measurement for this, but if you prefer a more accurate approach, then you can use measurement for your cloth. Next, I'll duplicate the pattern by pressing Ctrl C and Ctrl V. Once I have the duplicate, I'll modify it. To do that, I'll select the Edit Pattern tool and grab the bottom edge of the new pattern, then drag it downward to make it longer. Then I'll make it the width 3 times wider. The reason I'm making it 3 times wider is because I want to add knife pleats to the skirt. For this style, each pleat will have 3 folds, so we need to ensure the pattern is wide enough to fit them. To make the pattern wider, I'll double click on it while the transform tool is selected. Then I'll drag the transform box and right click and go to width. Here I'll enter 300% to make it 3 times wider. To create the folds for the pleats, I'll add internal line to the pattern. To do that, I'll use the Edit Pattern tool. Right click on the top edge of the pattern and select Split, then Uniform Split. Once in the Uniform Split menu, I'll pick the size that works for my design. The number should be divisible by 3, since each pleat will need 3 folds. For this example, I'm splitting it into 21 sections. Nice! Now we can see the distance between each split. If you don't see these numbers, you can enable them by turning on Show Line Length and Angle. This will make it easier to check the spacing of the folds. Next, I'll select the Edit Pattern tool and click on the left edge of the pattern. Then I'll right click and choose Offset as internal line. In the offset settings, I'll enter the split distance value for the distance field, and for the number of offset, I'll set it to 20. This will create evenly spaced internal lines based on the measurement we set earlier. To turn the internal lines into pleats, I'll select the Pleats Fold tool. Then I'll double click at the start of the pattern and go all over the internal lines and double click at the end. Once the Pleats Fold settings appear, I won't change anything here and click OK. Nice, the pleats are now ready. To connect the pleats to the pattern, I'll use the Pleat Sewing tool. First, I'll sew along the bottom edge of the top pattern by selecting it and adding a sewing line. Then I'll select the edge of the pleated pattern and go all over the pleats, and finish by clicking at the end. Next, I'll duplicate all the patterns and rotate them in the 3D view to position them at the back of the character. I'll make sure to rotate the patterns so the normals are facing the correct direction. Once positioned, I'll use Segment Sewing tool to sew these patterns together. By the way, if your sewing lines look twisted, you can fix this by selecting Edit Sewing tool to reverse the sewing direction. Now it's time to simulate. Marvelous Designer's latest version has a big update for GPU simulation, making it much faster and more efficient for cloth simulation. For quicker results, I'll use the GPU simulation. But if you're looking for higher accuracy, you can switch to CPU simulation. Personally, I'll go with the GPU simulation. To start the simulation, I'll simply press the spacebar. Nice. If your cloth looks jagged or harsh, you can reduce the particle distance in the property editor to smooth them out. Lowering the particle distance gives finer details to the cloth. Now I'll work on the top part of the uniform. To create the top part of the outfit, I'll start by selecting the rectangle tool and drawing a rectangle. Then I'll add 2 points to define the neckline and armholes by estimating their placement. Using the edit curvature tool, I'll refine the curves to shape them properly. Next, I'll right click on the pattern and select symmetric pattern to duplicate and mirror it automatically. This ensures both sides of the shirt are identical. For the back part of the shirt, I can simply duplicate the front part and modify it using the same method. I'll use edit pattern tool to make any necessary adjustment to the design. Once both parts are ready, I'll connect them using segment sewing tool and simulate them to check the results. Now it's time to make the sleeves. To make the sleeves, I'll start by drawing a rectangle and adjusting its shape like this. Then I'll click on the line of the sleeve pattern, right click and choose unfold. Next I'll press Shift F to display the arrangement points. Using these points, I'll wrap the sleeve pattern around the shoulder to position it correctly. Then I'll sew the sleeve to the body using segment sewing tool. To mirror the sleeve onto the other side, I'll just right click on the sleeve pattern and choose symmetric pattern with sewing. To create the triangular pattern in the center of the chest, I'll first add extra points to the neckline. Then I'll shape a triangle and sew it onto the garment. Next, let's create the collar. Making a collar isn't that difficult. I'll use the polygon tool to draw a shape like this, then fine tune it to match the design. Once it's ready, I'll sew it to the neckline using segment sewing tool. To mirror the collar on the other side, I'll use symmetrical pattern and sewing. And the red tie is the same thing with red color. I'll use the same method, drawing the shape with polygon tool, fine tuning it and sewing it to the shirt. To make sure the cloth layers collide properly, I can add layers to the pattern. And finally, we can simulate this all together. So yeah, that's it for the video. I'll be back with another part of this video where I'll cover the animation. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you on the next one.